Hello and welcome to Agri-History. This episode will be a branching point between this season and the next season. We will discuss the domestication of brassicas and their transition from a wild plant to a oilseed and vegetable plant. We will cover Brassica napa, rapa, and oleracea in this episode, alongside Brassica evolution. There are 6 species of Brassica commonly used in agriculture. 3 are diploid in nature. These are Brassica nigra, Brassica oleracea, and Brassica rapa. These species are not closely related to each other and diverged 20 million years ago. The other 3 species are called Brassica carnata, Brassica gensea, and Brassica napus. These 3 species are formed through the hybridization of the latter 3 species. The first species we'll cover is Brassica oleracea. Brassica oleracea has been used to breed multiple different vegetables used worldwide, including cabbage, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi, kale, broccoli, and cauliflower. Much of the understanding we have of this plant species is through the research of Dr. Liberty H. Bailey in 1922, 1930, and 1940. Now, how did the crops that were bred from Brassica oleracea come into being? One school of thought is that the derivative crops of Brassica oleracea have multiple origins, and these origins are derived from crossbreeding between Brassica oleracea and closely related species. Kale, cauliflower, and broccoli were bred in the Greek and Roman era and geography. Brussels sprouts likely evolved from a second lineage of Brassica oleracea and was likely the most recent of the cole crops we bred. Brussels sprouts may have formed in the Low Countries of the medieval period. These specimens have risen to prominence in the 18th century around the city of Brussels. This would be due to their ability to adapt to many different climate conditions and be resistant to many different diseases and pests. During our current era, most of our Brussels sprout cultivars are bred in Japan and are F1 hybrids in nature, such as Jade Cross. All the remaining cole crops likely developed from a third lineage of Brassica oleracea. Brassica rapa evolved in a similar pathway as Brassica oleracea, but these crops were bred in China. The following plants have been bred from this species. Bok choy was bred in China from Brassica rapa, as was Chinese cabbage and a obscure vegetable called kumasuna. Turnips were also bred from Brassica rapa, although it is unknown where. Brassica napus was used to breed the crop known as rutabaga, and Brassica napus alongside Brassica rapa were both used to breed different types of canola, which we'll cover later on. Brassica napus evolved from a hybridization between 2 species of Brassica, Brassica oleracea and Brassica rapa. This process happened between 7,500 years ago and 12,500 years ago. In ancient Greece and Rome, Plautus wrote about brassicas in the 3rd century BC, and many later philosophers and writers of that era also wrote about brassicas. In India, brassicas are mentioned in the ancient Sanskrit writings that have been dated back to 1500 BC. In the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, brassicas were used as a food and medicine crop, and these brassicas were mentioned in many herbal documents back in those time periods. Prior to World War II, many European countries were producing vegetable oil from brassicas, with most being produced in Asia. Military blockades during World War II prevented Canada from obtaining useful amounts of vegetable oil. This drove interest into breeding brassicas with oil capacity, and found that Brassica rapa and Brassica napus served that purpose well. But the high uric acid in the seeds, and therefore the oil, were said to damage the cardiovascular parts of animal bodies, making it ill-suited as a livestock feed. To fix this issue, key researchers in plant breeding in the universities of Alberta and Manitoba, such as Dr. Keith Downey and Dr. Balder Stephenson, used new plant breeding technology to breed new Brassica rapa and napa cultivars with low uric acid and high nutrition. The first cultivar Oro was bred in 1968 from Brassica napus, a new cultivar with low uric acid and low glucosinolate content. Glucosinolates, by the way, are what make mustard seeds have that strong flavor, was bred, and this breed was called Tower. In 1977, the first Brassica rapa with these traits was made. This began a new era of oilseed crops. These Brassica cultivars were named canola, which is a combination of the word Canada and olla, which means oil. Canada oil, or canola. Later on, regulatory standards were made to define what a canola plant is. And so it was decided that canola would have less than 2% uric acid and less than 30 micromoles of glucosinolates. And so canola was born. This concludes our season on protein and oilseed crops. Stay tuned for the next season where we talk about vegetables. See you then!